And so what does your protocol look like?
If we're just talking detoxification,
Sure.
General thing we call push-catch liver detox. Turn up the cellular response, induce the genes that make the proteins, detoxify the cell. Then you need your liver to pull it into the liver and dump it out with the bile. The pathway for a toxin to get out of the liver cell is in the bile. Every single cell in the liver is fed by the blood on one side where it can harvest the toxins and drained on the other side by bile. And so you need to couple cellular detox to bile flow, and then you need to catch those toxins in there.
I don't know what the you just said, but I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, you hear it.
I mean?
We have to share we're here.
You're so good, man. It's that blending of the artist and the scientist, man.
And are we going to manifest from default survival genes, or are we going to get these higher ordered regenerative genes going? Those genes that you're going to express are unfolded, they're read by the RNA, and then they're brought out to the ribosomes to make the proteins, which are the end of the whole program. This is what we're expressing in our consciousness according to our potentiality at the moment.
Dude.
Oh, I hear it's Austin City Limits this week. And so many people who come up, I look at him and, that's the wizard. I'm like, just take that. Oh my God, who turned the lights on? Everything's better.
And you just know right away. You're like, this is how we balance this out. Let's bring this back to equilibrium. And that's what you did for me.
But it's really that ability to offset the adrenaline and take you out of sympathetic into parasympathetic. And it was the tool to bring you down.
You are the quintessential medicine man, dude.
Well, so we're here today with Dr. Chris Shade from Quicksilver Scientific and an old friend, multiple guests here, Eben Britton. And I think Eben and I are going to co-host this a little bit and pick Dr. Shade's mad scientist brain. Not self-proclaimed. We've actually,
we've given him that moniker.
Yeah. Don't trust anyone who gives himself the mad scientist moniker.
Self-proclaimed, it's got to come by consensus from the crowd for you to get your initial MS. It's not Master of Science.
Exactly.
It's the mad science.
Yeah, so we'll cover a bunch today. I met Dr. Shade in, was it May when you were here for the Runga event? He's back in town for that. And I remember when I saw you up at the Quicksilver Airstream. Yeah, I'm like, who is this guy? And again, I'm like, he looks like Louis C.K. He's as funny as him too. And then I started to hang with you, and then we had dinner together. I'm like, this guy is something else.
Absolutely, dude. There's nothing quite like Dr. Shade, man.
No, I love it. And one of the things that fascinated me was how you got into the space, and your kind of origin story is like, of course, this is, now that I've gotten to know you, of course, this is how you came upon this stuff. A bit of a circuitous route.
Yeah. Everybody wants your origin story to be like, I woke up when I was 5 one day and I wanted to save the world, and I'm here to save the world, a life of gratitude and service. It's like, no, you just like get in and you start rambling, and it was like, I got into, it's like I grew up in a steel town, son of a professor. I was like kind of atheistic, and you get to college and you drop that first really big tab of acid and everything changes, right? And then you're like, oh my God, everything's different than I thought it was. The plants are talking. Oh geez, and then all this science you're doing is getting pretty freaking boring. And then you go on the road, you travel, you do this and that, you start growing weed, and you're like into, can I make organic biodynamic weed indoors and all this crazy shit. And, eventually I was like, well, how about I be a farmer? And so then, I end up being an organic farmer. And, I joked that I went out of business the year Whole Foods came around. There was no freaking money in it at the time, but I'm trying to do it because it's just like, what's got to be done? Like, this has got to be done, right? And we're going to get through health through food, And then, one thing leads to another. I ended up of course, where you'd expect, I ended up at Disney World. You know?
Literally?
Yeah.
And that's your own personal one?
Not my own personal Disney World. This wasn't imaginary. Pink elephants. It was, I closed up that farm and went to work for Rodale Institute. And Rodale Institute was doing all this sort of science around conversion of land from conventional to organic. And I got to the end of this internship, and obviously I was a little too wild to stay there working in the science department. There was a job open, and they're like, dude, I don't think so. Hey, we got this opportunity down at Epcot Center.
Oh my God.
And they had started doing some consulting for the World Bank, and about how they'd screwed up the first green revolution, and how they were sending like fertilizer and tractors into the middle of Bangladesh, and these guys are just poisoning themselves, and they got broken tractors. It's like nothing worked. And Rodale, old man Rodale, always went into areas, worked with what plants lived through the droughts. Like that's where amaranth came from, Rodale. And he was in Africa, and he was like trying to help them. They're like, what's that shit you're eating there from behind the shed? And it turns out it's super high protein, grows anywhere. So, just do that kind of stuff. And so they're working with the World Bank, and they're like, hey, would you come down to the Disney Flower and Garden Festival 25th anniversary? And we're going to have these like shows out on the Epcot floor. And like, this is regenerative farming, or solving farming practices in Asia, solving it in Africa. Here's what we do in South America, and you'll be regenerative agriculture of North America. And so they had me shaved and in overalls in front of a little red barn and showing people compost and worms. And so the beauty is that they trained me to be a public speaker, and it was like 6 weeks of training with these actors, education coaches, science education coaches and stuff. And then I gave the same talk 4 times a day for 6 weeks and learned that audience dynamic.
Oh, wow.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And in that, I was living.
How old were you at this time?
I'm like 24, 25.
Wow.
And I'm living in this gated and condo community of, Epcot's all these internationals. Yeah. So it's all these 18 to 23-year-olds living in this gated and condo community. They're all living on top of each other. And they got pools and volleyball courts and hot tubs. And that was nice. And I spotted this hot little French number and tracked her down until made that happen, and then married her. And so I had to like have a real life, and so I'm like, well, I better go back to school. And so I went back to grad school, looking at pollution from agriculture in streams. And then I was going to go to do that for a PhD, and it was really boring what they were doing. It was in the middle of Illinois, and the rain comes and the fertilizer shows up in the stream. Yeah, no shit. Like this is our magnum opus is to say that, and then I found this insane man named Bob Hudson, and he had these global cycles that he was modeling of mercury moving through the environment, going everywhere. You had this big computational model for where mercury goes everywhere. And he says, and I talked to him, I'm like, well, he's vastly smarter than all these other guys. I should hang out with him. And he's like, are you good in a lab? And I'm like, oh, I'm the man. Don't worry, I'm good in a lab. And so he's like, yeah, make me an analytical system for mercury. And that's what I did. And I patented that. And then I wanted to get back into people. And because the environmental thing is it's just boring. It never goes anywhere as a profession because the polluters pollute and they pay you to say, well, they only polluted so much, and it's just like magnum opus. Nope. Yeah. And so get back into people. And so I took the patent and I started Quicksilver Scientific, Quicksilver being liquid silver, watery silver. That's the old European word for mercury, doing mercury testing and applying it to people. And so I'm testing mercury in people. People had a lot more of the dental amalgam back then. And then, of course, they're getting it from fish. We still had mercury in vaccines. And first I have the testing, but then you have to have a solution. And I started using all those chemical chelators. I was using, I got all my amalgams. I had 17 amalgams, got them all out in 3 hours. It was a little aggressive. It was a little aggressive, threw myself into it, then start just chewing down these chelators. And I think I'm just going to be like measuring mercury in urine, and seeing how much is from the amalgam versus the fish. Because that was my technology I patented, was a quick way to separate. This is methyl mercury from fish. That's inorganic mercury from the dentistry. And look at urine and hair and blood and see how you're processing all this stuff. So I think I'm just going to be analyzing this stuff. And I'm looking for the mercury coming out my urine. And I'm like, well, I'm just not taking enough chelator. Yeah, so I'm taking more. I'm taking 1,500 milligrams of DMSA a day, and nothing's coming out, but I'm getting just sicker and sicker and sicker. I'm just sliding into the ground, the dark night of my biochemical soul. And I'm watching these guys come through Boulder County to the Colorado Functional Forums there, and they're talking about the GI tract and the immune system in it, and detoxification, and liver pumping into the GI. And I'm like, GI. I'm like, wait, what the fuck am I doing pushing all this shit through the kidneys? The kidneys take like 7 years to regenerate, and the GI takes 7 days. It's like, oh, I know what I got to do. And so I went home. There was this material I was making that would take all the mercury out of water. And yeah, you could use it for remediating water, but I was using it for measurement. I would take all the mercury out of like a gallon of water and put it into a little place and be able to analyze it. It was concentration. And I was like, I can use that, clean it up, put it through my gut, and pull all the mercury down to the gut and pull it away from the kidneys. And so I went home, I made this stuff, and I started just taking tons of it, and I fixed myself in just like a few weeks. I was like a new man.
Wow.
And then I introduced that. At the time I was hanging out, these are with a guy named Hal Huggins, who was the original mercury in dentistry is bad guy. He wrote It's All in Your Head in 1973. He just died a few years ago. And Dietrich Klinghardt was the other guy. These are the first two guys that I was introduced to who looked at this material and were like, oh, that's the shit. That's what we were missing. And they started using that, putting it into their protocols. And that was really what started Quicksilver as a company. Then the next step.
What year was this?
So it's a good question. My TBI is on the date stamp. It's funny. It's like your TBIs really define you. Right. So I had this TBI in high school, and, I was riding a bike, and I had my soccer clothes in a little bag in the front. It locks into the spokes. I flip over right on my head. Just boom.
Shit, dude.
Just boom, right on your head. And I don't know how long I was out. This guy found me, one of my neighbors, and he's like, oh my God, you okay? I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I'm just going to school. To soccer practice, and I'm just going to take off as soon as I open my eyes. He's like, your eyes are open, dude. And I'm like, well, it's all black, so maybe I better sit down, So it was good TBI. In fact, there are some guys who do that Quiegler out of the quantitative EEG, and they map out the brain and stuff, and they use mine as a focal TBI, and they were telling people that it was improvised explosive device, that I was a Navy SEAL. And I was like, no, that's mine. And so the point about it defining you was like, what's it on? And so it's the spot where dates are stored. So like,
no shit.
Yeah. So I'm always bad on date, in the past. And it's a spot that controls compulsive behavior and cursing. And a couple other things like that. And it's like, oh, is that me?
That explains that.
Is that me? And, it's a left brain, like a right hand, left brain. So your rational side. And I was like, like a real rational, like science guy. And then that wasn't working anymore. And part of that, like when I went off and I was a farmer and stuff, I got into all this esoteric stuff. I was into Rosicrucianism and theosophy and masonry. And then I was also on the side, I was getting into Eastern religions, Zen and Taoism. And so I was reforming like how to bring all this stuff together through a more creative lens, through the right brain. And, what is it when, you mix the scientist and, and the artist, you get an inventor, and so it's like, that was, I was spit out of that process being this guy, with this brain doing this thing. And so to get back to the mercury stuff. So that was probably like 2008, about 2008. And then I have to figure out, well, why this stuff works so well. And they start using it. It just works like a freaking bomb. And I realized it's all part of this glutathione system, like how we detoxify, we link the toxin onto a molecule we make, like glutathione. That's one of the sort of big three that we use. And then you're going to ship it through a series of doors out your liver, into your bile, into the small intestine. And the problem then is you reabsorb a whole lot of it. And so what that powder was doing that I was making, there were these little silica grains, and it was like coating it with a chelator. So you don't absorb it, but it's binding all the metal that comes down there. And that keeps you from reabsorbing it. And then there's, some other magic in the intestines where it's kind of signaling to the body that everything's cool now. Start letting down the toxin flow because it's going out. And so it was starting this process, but it was the glutathione system it was working through. And so then I'm like, well, at a cell level now, I got to be able to get some glutathione in there, kind of push this stuff out. And glutathione, you take it in capsules, it's never going to be absorbed right. You're going to break it down into the 3 amino acids it comes from: glycine, cysteine, and glutamate. And I mean, yeah, you're getting those as precursors, but why take glutathione? So I need to cheat that system. And I found these things called liposomes, and they're, these little balls, that are made out of the same thing your cell membranes are made of. So they're like little cells. And if you make them, and you can tuck the glutathione into them, and if you make them small enough, they absorb right through the oral cavity into the blood, and they get out throughout the system. So we were able to make this glutathione work. And some other people had made liposomes. There's some liposomes out there. There was liposomal glutathione. It kind of smelled like ass and rotten eggs at the same time. There were some bad things out there. And we made like pharma grade stuff. And it was like, wow, this is great. And then you're like, what else can I do with these liposomes? I think that molecule should go in, and that molecule. And what if I put some THC in that and some CBD? And then soon we're like, oh my God, these delivery systems, it's high bioavailable. How do you get this stuff to just rocket into the system? More like an injection. And that was what this was. So then we expanded into cannabinoid medicine, metabolic medicine, immunity, and then we do a ton with longevity, so it's like I'm back to health and building health. I tried that sort of farmer way, and that is, where we've come with regenerative agriculture and stuff. It's just beautiful. But, often we need to collect these nutrients, purify and bring them down into these high impact forms, these medicines. And so that's, what I do now.
That's quite the origin story.
Wow, dude. Love that.
And what's it look like to, again, I've heard a lot about chelation. I've known some people who've done it and without much success. And
can Dr. Shade, can you define chelation for me?
Yeah, people use that term for just about everything.
Yeah, I feel like it's
I'm going to
overused.
chelate the radiation.
Right.
Sorry, you can't do that. That's a wave, and chelation's molecules. So a chelate, very technically, will be one molecule which can bind a metal in more than one place. EDTA is a quintessential chelator. And then there's different chelators for different metals. And so you have these sulfur-based ones that are used in medicine, and that would be DMSA and DMPS. Then you have EDTA. This is oxygen and nitrogen base. And it's like mercury likes the sulfur ones, lead likes these nitrogen, oxygen ones, arsenic and others fit in between. So very technically, it's got to have two binding sites onto one metal. But even with this like DMSA, we're still going to call that chelation. And there, two of those molecules will bind very strongly onto the metal, and they're going to make it in a form that can go out through excretion easier. Uh-huh. And so pulling it off of albumin and different proteins in the blood and lymph and make a form you can pee out easily.
Okay.
So normally this mercury is going through the liver and bile. Methyl mercury from fish goes exclusively that way. Inorganic mercury from the amalgams will go through urine and bile. It's just going to take a lot of that and make it soluble real quick through the kidneys. Uh-huh. And, so the idea is good, but, when you start stirring the pot of the metals and, you're sort of pulling them from one place off to another, the chelator lets go, it redeposits somewhere else. They call it redistribution of metals. And so if like the gates out and the filtration of the kidneys into the urinary stream isn't like open and flowing, if the liver to bile to GI isn't open and flowing, and you start stirring that pot, for a little bit, the chelators are getting the metals are moving them around, but then the chelators are getting detoxified and stuff, and then the metals just kind of drop where they are. And so you have the possibility of redistributing from, a more benign tissue into your brain or into your thyroid, into, your adrenals. And so they can be tricky that way. And then, when you take chelators, when you have amalgams in, it's almost like painting your mouth and your intestines with mercury. There's this massive layer of mercury all through your GI, lips to anus. There's this huge level. And when those chelators absorb, they start touching all that, and they can bring that load of metal, which the amalgam stuff you don't really absorb, through your GI. But it's coating and irritating and disrupting all that. And then the chelators can pull some of that into circulation. So the chelators, there's a lot of really bad stories of chelators, and there's good ones, but they weren't made for the sort of chronic disease states that we have now in the chronic toxicity. These things are made for like workers in battery factories and stuff who are otherwise tough dudes who just had massive cadmium and lead levels, and they had to bring those down real fast, clean them up, get them back on the floor. So they're a little heavy-handed for what we do now. Now, that being said, once you go in with our systems, upregulate glutathione system, open up kidneys, open up liver, all the flows going out, all the intracellular protection is up and humming, then you want to overlay a little chelator and get some out faster, then you can do that. And that's what Huggins ended up doing, is using our stuff as a base and dropping a little chelator on top. Guys at the Cleveland Clinic, like Mark Hyman and Todd Lepine, well, he's actually at Ultra Wellness, they'll do that. They'll use our system as a base, throwing a little chelator on the top. But when you use this system as a base, you actually don't need to do anything else.
Interesting.
But then people will say chelation for all kinds of crap, like zeolite. Zeolite is a great thing, but all this bullshit that you hear about these super micronized zeolites, they're going to go into your body. They're going to go into the cell, and they'll like zap the toxin. They'll grab the toxin and take it out, and they'll only get the bad one, and they won't take the good one, and all this mystical shit. I'm not going to put a piece of clay. You want clay IV?
Oh,
do you want a clay IV?
No, thank you.
Right?
That's how they do it?
No, they don't do that, but they have the zeolite broken into like just little tiny chunks that are so small that actually some of this stuff gets absorbed into the system. And then they say that it's going and it's doing all this perfect cleanup and stuff. But really, it's this hormetic stimulant to especially the immune system. It's like, why is there clay in the blood? Oh my God. It's like, yesterday we were talking about endotoxin, which is like little pieces and parts of bacteria you get from leaky gut, periodontitis. It creates this chronic inflammation. And this one guy said, yeah, sometimes it's used therapeutically to induce fevers to kill cancer. Well, chemotherapy, is a pretty radical thing, and it may do that. And, these zeolites and stuff, they induce something in you, but it's more of a freak out reaction. And they like to pretend and use that word chelation, that the zeolites are going in and doing all these things. And the zeolites have really low binding capacity for metals. It's just, they are working. There is a system for getting rid of stuff, and there are different ways to upregulate it. And that's what we do, is we know from the literature that these molecules will do this. Eventually there's some magic in there, and we say these molecules go better than those molecules.
Yeah.
And there's some energetics to why we choose one thing over another, but everything we can base out of the literature as to how these things work.
And so what does your protocol look like specifically?
Yeah. So, if we're just talking detoxification,
sure,
we have this general thing we call push-catch liver detox. Nice, simple 2-part thing, something called liver sauce. It's like A1 for your liver. You dump it on the outside before somebody eats your liver. That was my tongue-in-cheek thing. It came out of the lab as liver sauce, and the PR agency was like, oh, I like it.
I like that.
And actually, it was first called Sunny Sauce.
Why is that?
You're like, Sunny, SONNY, because the first patient on it was James Caan.
Wow.
Oh,
the late, great James Caan was living in a house where all this rain, there was flooding in the apartment, and it was all moldy and stuff, and he was a mess. I remember talking to him, Doc, I just feel like shit all the time. Doc, you gotta fix it. And his trainer, had turned us on to him. And so it was Sunny Sauce, then it was liver sauce. So there's just a little history there.
I love that.
But that fixed him up real nice. And so liver sauce, what it does is you've got stuff that turn up the cellular response to induce the genes that make the proteins that detoxify the cell. So you're making glutathione. You're making glutathione as transferase, is this little fulcrum to grab mercury, pry it off of a cellular protein, and link it onto glutathione. And then you got that glutathione mercury blend, and then you're going to push it out of the cell into the blood. Then you need your liver to pull it into the liver and dump it out with the bile. So liver sauce has things to regulate cellular response to dump toxins, liver transit to pull it in, and bile flow, cholagogues, traditional bitters that dump bile out of the liver. Because the pathway for a toxin to get out of the liver cell is in the bile. That's the green highway. Every single cell in the liver is fed by the blood on one side, where it can harvest the toxins, and drained on the other side by bile. And bile is going down to digest your fats. It's going down as a detergent to wash your upper GI. It's service route bringing in glutathione for detoxification reactions in the upper GI. And it's those transporters that the toxins are dumped out in. And so you need to couple cellular detox to bile flow. And then you need to catch those toxins in there. So you take your liver sauce, activates all that stuff because of this nanoparticle delivery of the liposomes and nanoemulsions. And we'll talk about the difference between those two different particle types. But because of that, all these compounds get in all at once. If you're taking capsules of them, one absorbs now, one absorbs later, one of them takes 8 hours to get in. You're hitting different cues all the time. But in this delivery, everything goes in, pow, 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 pow. Everything moves. It goes into the liver, goes out with the bile. And then 30 minutes after the liver sauce, you come in with the ultra binder. So ultra binder has a number of different toxin binders, one of them being zeolite, but big chunks of zeolite that you're not going to absorb. One of them being charcoal, one of them being IMD, the first thing that I ever made, metal special, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, a little bit of nickel and lead as well, binder. And then something else called chitosan. Each one of these binders has a different specificity. So a specificity is if a binder has specificity, a little spoon of the binder gets a lot of toxin. If it has low specificity, you need a shovelful to get that same amount of toxin. Now, there's a lot of different toxins, and each of the binders has its own chemistry. And so it's got a sweet spot in the soup of toxins that it pulls and holds onto. So you want to cocktail the different binders. So we got 5 different binders in there and some stuff for GI health. And so that's how the system works roughly. Now, if I'm really going after metals, I'm going to need extra glutathione. So I'm going to take the glutathione.
The liposomal you have, yeah.
Yeah, with the liver sauce. I'm going to be pushing a lot through kidney too. So I'll take kidney care, which is a new one that'll help the kidney flow. And I'm probably going to add in a source of phosphatidylcholine. Phosphatidylcholine is a phospholipid. These are a class of lipids that are water soluble on one end and fatty on the other end. They're what your cell membranes are made out of. And cell membranes are like the unsung hero in what the power we're trying to generate into our system here. You look at the cell membrane. So the cell on the outside has this membrane. It's fatty on the middle and water soluble on both sides. It's called that lipid bilayer. And it itself is amazing. It's got all these proteins that go through it, all these transporters that come in and out, and it's got all these little sensing devices that are communication devices for cell-to-cell communication to get all the cells together. And that communication network is all running through the extracellular matrix. They used to think it was just this goop between the cells, but it's the one organ that goes tip to tail and connects everything. And as they got in to start understanding it, it's a very hyper-ordered space. In fact, Bill Tiller from Stanford would describe these hyper-ordered ion channels that ran through it, that were electrical channels, and say those are probably the meridians. And the Germans, who are really into the extracellular matrix, would describe the puncture effect, like from acupuncture. And they would say this little puncture will happen and these changes cascade through the extracellular matrix. And the lion's share of the change may not be right there. That's how you can hit a meridian on your leg and change, an organ way up farther.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's the cascading movement of the extracellular matrix through all these communication systems. And that's where all the energy medicine lives. And I think breakdown to that system is where you get electromagnetic sensitivities, and where that system should be shielding you, kind of like the rubber around a wire. It loses its shielding potential. They used to think that the EMF was loss of the shielding around the nerves, the myelin sheaths around the nerves. And they figured that wasn't true. And I think it's really the autonomics are losing their extracellular matrix shielding. And because it's really autonomic offs that you throw your autonomics off with the EMF. All right. So let's get back into the membrane here. We've extended out into the rest of the body just to share the glory of the extracellular matrix, but we have to share. We're here.
You're so fucking good, man. I don't know what the fuck you just said, but I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, you hear it. I mean, you're like, I can't repeat the words, but I know what happened.
It's that blending of the artist and the scientist, man. Like, you have such a magical way
with the 6 weeks of training at Epcot Center.
Yeah, exactly. That was it.
Oh, wait till we talk about the membranous organelles in the cell, because you get back to the cell membrane. So all those exchanges, all the nutrients in, the toxins out, they're all coming and going through the matrix, through the membranes, in and out of the cell. And then you get to what's inside the cell. And then, what do we talk about all the time in our world? Mitochondria, right? Mitochondria, we need healthy mitochondria. What's mitochondria? An outer membrane, and then inside, like an accordion, is just folded up membrane. And that membrane health is measured as a membrane potential. It's an ability to separate charge across the membrane. And like the quintessential with that is separating the protons in the outside of the mitochondria to drive through ATP synthase to create ATP. That's the ATP synthesis. You put all this stuff onto one side until it gets so big it rushes back through. And so you're building these electrical charges and then discharging them into action. And there's enzymes housed all through these membranes that are doing different things. And the more you can separate black and white and then let it flow together and separate it again, the more power you have in the system. And it's like this Taoist thing. Gray is dead. It's always interleaving little fine layers of black and white. The more finely you can interleave them, the more power is generated into the system. And that's just in the mitochondria. Then you get to the endoplasmic reticulum. So, there's the nucleus in there, and everybody thought that was like the power center, or like the decision center. This isn't where decisions are made. There's a library of recipes in the nucleus. That's all it's got. And wrapping around it is the endoplasmic reticulum. And this is just like tons of membrane just wrapped around, layer after layer after layer, making these, accordion-like layers, creating this power structure. And then it breaks into these little tubules, and the tubules go to all the other membranous organelles. So every mitochondria has a tubule going from the endoplasmic reticulum going up and touching it. The Golgi apparatus, which is how we make more advanced proteins, and some of those proteins are spit out into the extracellular matrix for the fibroblasts to build the collagen and stuff. And that's a big membranous structure, and it's touching the endoplasmic reticulum. And so it's connecting to everything there. And there's all kinds of stuff made in the endoplasmic reticulum. All these proteins are made in the rough one. All your hormone transformations are made in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. But then this is freaking great. So they did this experiment where they put this electrode into the outer membrane and then one threw it into the endoplasmic reticulum membrane. And they're not touching. And if you perturb the electrical potential in the outer membrane, immediately, like at light speed, the the endoplasmic reticulum membrane does exactly equal and opposite perturbation. So they're connected with this light speed communication. And then the reticulum is the quarterback inside the cell. It's touching every one of the other membranous organelles, which is where the really high advanced stuff is. And they're deciding together on what the potentiality is. The outer membranes reading resources outside, nutritive resources. The inner membranes are reading the resources, the redox potential on the inside. And they're coming to a decision on, in its consciousness, what is possible to be manifest at that time given the situation. And are we going to manifest from default survival genes, or are we going to get these higher ordered, regenerative genes going? And so that whole huddle is happening, and the endoplasmic reticulum is talking all over, and it's talking to the outer membrane, and then the decisions are brought into the nucleus, and then those genes that you're going to express are unfolded, they're read by the RNA, and then they're brought out to the ribosomes to make the proteins, which are this, the end of the whole program is this is what we're expressing in our consciousness according to our potentiality at the moment.
So how do we get to the point where we express?
Come on, dude.
The and I forget even what you said. The latter versus the former. How do we?
The default mode stuff
mechanisms
versus the luxury stuff where we're going to proliferate and have regenerative programs, right?
Yeah.
So you got to get the shit out. Because the toxins are coming in and they're down-regulating all these enzymes that are good, and they're like struggling to do their job. And then there's accumulation of free radicals and damaged proteins in the cell. We're not cleaning stuff out. You look at like something like autophagy, you're clearing out. We know like mitophagy, we're going to digest an old mitochondria and make a new one. But there's piles of bad protein all over the place. You have to clear those out. And that's not even all the environmental toxins, but all that stuff gets in and it holds down the potentiality of the cell.
Are senescent cells part of that?
Yeah. So how do you get a senescent cell? So
Can you explain what a senescent cell is?
So senescence is this big area of research in longevity stuff now. And a senescent cell is like this zombie cell. It's stopped reproducing. It's not in growth phase anymore, but it's still there. It won't die. It won't go into apoptosis or autophagy and, become raw material for new cells. And instead, it starts secreting pro-inflammatory cytokines that are luring other cells into that arrested growth, arrested senescent program. And that's called the secretory associated senescent phenotype. The SASP is when they go into that, near dead state, but they're sounding this decay signal.
Like a tractor beam, bringing these other cells towards it.
It's luring it. Instead of pulling in, it's spreading out. It's cascading, expanding fields of degeneration. Inflammatory fields spreading. And this is, you look at an old person's face with the wrinkly, this thin skin, there's just tons of senescent cells and they're not growing anymore. That's why they're getting thin and wrinkly. And so how does it even get into that senescent thing? I mean, yeah, it does with age, but what's hitting it? And so toxins will go in, and toxins, ultimately, this is a mitochondrial dysfunction, but the toxins will go in, often damage the telomeres, the ends of the chromosomes that are long when you're young, short when you're old. Well, everybody's looking on how to lengthen those, but the toxins themselves are shortening them. And if it's acute, there's then a mitochondrial dysfunction that develops. And the mitochondria are actually the things that are releasing those pro-inflammatory cytokines. So the toxicity can drive you into senescence. And then how do you get out of senescence? There's two ways. You're either going to reverse the program, and there you have to get a biochemical program that's associated as sort of a pro-growth one. So your redox potential, you're going to have a more antioxidant-based cell. You're going to have a clean, so you're going to detoxify, move stuff out. This trigger that we hit with the liver sauce, it's called NRF2, turns up all these intracellular antioxidants and detoxification mechanisms, cleans up the whole cell. And there's all these triggers in there that know when the cell's under stress, and they shut down different proteins in there. And all of a sudden, all those proteins get alive. And so you can actually pull a cell out of senescence, or if it's gone too far, you have to kill it with a senolytic. And senolytics that we know, like quercetin, fisetin, actually for a long time, like TA65 sold this a really expensive cycloestragonol, and they thought it was lengthening your telomeres. Well, turns out more likely it's just its very potent senolytic activity is clearing a lot of this stuff out. And so that's how you kill these cells and move them out of the system. But yeah, that senescence is one of those decay mechanisms.
Fuck. Dude. A lot of info. Well,
I hear it's Austin City Limits this week.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I'd love to stay on like kind of some more of your protocols, because I have a bunch at home ever since, again, we connected. You had given me a bunch when we left the event, and then I just started ordering them. And so, on some level, I want to know how they work, but I also want to know how to, like I was telling you before the podcast, like how to titrate these things. What's the order? When do I have the ones first thing in the morning? What's the, the pairing of the different ones? So
then what programs are we looking for here? So some of these things are mitochondrial building and adaptogens and sirtuin activators, sort of longevity things, what we associate with that. And then some of these cleanup, these detoxification protocols. So the detoxification, my favorite, recipe right now is the liver sauce, glutathione, kidney care, and membrane mend.
Oh, I love that stuff. Is that the stuff that makes the red stuff? Yeah.
Yes. I remember I saw that picture of
at the dot. Yeah.
Eben anointed.
That's right.
I did that this time, and this kind of square guy looks at me and he goes, he's just staring at me while I'm talking about something. He goes, there's a red dot on your forehead. I'm like,
thanks, bro.
Thanks, bro. Yeah, I know. Anyways, the membrane mend is the phosphatidylcholine, and that's building all those membranous structures, the mitochondria, the plasmic reticulum, all those things. It's also helping with bile flow. I mean, and it can become acetylcholine. There's so many things that the PC does, but that's why I wanted to talk about the beauty of membranes. And when they're healthy, and phosphatidylcholine is one of the most important supplements in there.
Can I throw something in here for me? I think it's maybe a precursor to the protocols and everything that you do. Because something really incredible what you said, talking about the function of the cell, how it works, the processing of ATP.
Yeah.
And you said something about the black and white.
Yeah.
Getting them to function together so that they can move energy and power. And it brought me into, because one of my questions was about yin and yang.
Yeah. And that's what that's
And you
about.
were that's speaking to yin and yang on the fucking quantum level.
Yes.
And so for me, what's so fascinating about everything that, like all your products and everything that you do, man, is you've really tapped into that in creating this system of making the body function in its highest order.
Yeah.
Through that ancient Eastern philosophy of yin and yang.
Yeah, and it was only recently that we even put like ginseng in anything.
And it's just amazing to me, dude, because that's like, from the microcosm to the macrocosm, it's this balance of yin and yang, of light and dark, of
right. And it's not that you're in the gray zone,
right,
in the middle. So power in the cell is from separation of things. It's compartmentalization. Calcium is kept on the outside, magnesium on the inside. When that breaks down, actually, so like EMF, it affects voltage-gated calcium channels and that ability to separate the things apart from one another. And when you damage the EMF, damages that channel, and all of a sudden the calcium rushes in, and then there's this whole runaway inflammatory reaction that happens, and the cell can just die. But in the brain, you're controlling calcium in there, and when the EMF hits that makes the glutamate receptors more likely to go into a hyper exaggerated state that'll cause neuroinflammation, anxiety, like the sympathetic drive. And so the power in the system is maintaining separation. Sodium outside, potassium inside, calcium outside, magnesium inside, the protons outside of the inner membrane and then rushing in to create the ATP, that ability to keep setting polarity, maintain polarity.
Right.
It's like the great relationship workers, they love the dynamism of the man and the woman and the polarity.
Absolutely.
And keeping the polarity going. And where do we lose power is when the polarity freaking dies, and you get into the gray zone. And so the membranes and the little transporters and ion channels in them are, the things that you can affect that control that dynamic and control that flow out. And, and then the more we do, the more we're conscious of EMF and spaces and shielding ourselves from these things, the more we're taking away these interference or perversions that are coming from the outside that are affecting our ability to set, that separation and that formation of power, that polarization.
It's really interesting. And so from a protocol standpoint, if you're somebody like Cal or myself, someone who's taking good care of themselves, tapped in, using these products to optimize yourself, I guess where's the line or the line between upregulation, downregulation, detoxification, cleaning, amplifying, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the Chinese used to talk about tonification versus detoxification. Where are you draining out of the system because of excess, and where are you powering up? Increasingly, those lines are blurred a lot, but let's just pick off some of these things. Well,
in the hyper marketed world of supplements, or
no, I think we're finding ways to do both at the same time.
Okay.
So like when you have the classic thing in Chinese medicine was like, if you have a cold, you never take ginseng. You don't tonify. You take stuff that clears out the pathology. It's usually excess of water, excess of fire, something like that, excess of wind, and you're trying to drain and rebalance. And then you tonify and power back up. So let's just hold that aside for a little bit. And one of the reasons is because when we talk about things like sirtuin activation is getting you into those codifying those higher regenerative programs in your body. So I like to talk about AMPK and sirtuins. All right, so we're going to talk about detox stuff, that's NRF2, crossing over into AMPK, and then metabolic stuff, that's AMPK, then cascading into sirtuins. So let's go with the AMPK and sirtuins because, a lot of people here, biohackers or paleo or, keto, familiar with doing these kind of things. AMPK is this trigger for effective and clear metabolism that comes when you fast, when you carb restrict, when you exercise, or from certain nutraceuticals or pharmaceuticals. And it triggers you to mobilize your resources. So you're always going back and forth between storage, or anabolism, building up mass, and catabolism, breaking it down. So AMPK is shifting you over to catabolism. You're going to turn your fat into ketones and feed your body with that. You're going to become more insulin sensitive. You're going to make more more glucose transporters, and you're going to use energy very effectively. Now, this is good because the opposite of that is called AMPD, and that generates little inflammatory states that cause you to put on fat. So because of the ice ages, and you'll see there's a lot of lecturing about this, like David Perlmutter had just wrote a book called Drop Acid. You should be on the podcast. I don't know. He doesn't look like he's on acid.
Not enough anyway.
Not enough. And so that's about uric acid. And so high uric acid levels tend to shift you over to these inflammatory states that build fat on. And this is an ice age thing. We're geared to build fat whenever we see some fruit and carb around to get us through the winter. And so our genes are just tuned to that. And so we want to be able to go over to AMPK because, see, we used to run out of food all the time, and then AMPK would come clean you all up. All right. So AMPK starts with this, mobilizing resources, effectively burning carbs and fats. But then where we're trying to get to higher mitochondrial densities, you have to get to sirtuin activation. So that's the second part. And we hear about sirtuin activators like resveratrol and, Crestin does some of that and terastillabine. But the sirtuins need NAD to do that. And so when they activate these different programs, they're deacetylating these programs and turning on all these programs that are very efficient and regenerative and clean burning. And so AMPK and sirtuins work with NAD to keep you in this higher order of programs that you're asking about. Now, NRF2, that detox one. So a lot of these toxins generate inflammation. The inflammation blocks the sirtuins and blocks the AMPK and takes you in the wrong direction. And in fact, endotoxin that is actually not a toxin, it's parts of bacteria that you get from leaky gut, I mentioned before, from periodontitis, also shift you away from that. All right, so say we're in the shifted away state. Now we have to detoxify and get this stuff out of the body. That's when we're using these detox protocols like the push catch, the advanced push catch. Now we're going to be hitting these triggers of both NRF2 and AMPK. So, and when AMPK is high, NRF2 is more easily activated. So these are some clues for us as to how to more effectively detoxify. So if you're on a detox protocol, you should intermittent fast if you can, carb restrict if you can, even, early in the day doing that and a little carb at night, because you got to make sure you sleep. But the less carbs, and less food, more fasting time and moderate exercise will activate AMPK and make your NRF2 activation more effective. So there, NRF2 and AMPK, we're clearing out old toxins and stored fats, and with the stored fats come the fat soluble toxins. So all these things, when you're going into doing keto, if you're doing a lot of weight loss, you're gonna release a lot of fat soluble toxins, and that's like keto flu and all that stuff is mostly that. It's actually dangerous doing that without some detoxification support. At the very least, some GI binders like a charcoal to pick some of that stuff up, but really maintaining good bioflow and binding is really key during that process there. And so we have that cleanup of NRF2 and AMPK. We have the metabolic side of AMPK and sirtuins. And you're asking, how do we titrate all this stuff? More of the day-to-day is the AMPK and sirtuin side, that metabolic stuff, bringing the higher order, keeping those higher order programs going. And then more intermittently is let's clean out the junk. And you're going to do that. I often say, you start with a formal detoxification. Say our advanced push cats, do at least a month or month 1, and then do the double dose month 2, really get things squared away. You may go, people are really sick and really gotten sick. We may be detoxing for 3 to 6 months, but we can do a ton of work in 1 to 2 months. And then you're going to keep this stuff around. You got your liver sauce, you got your bond, your kidney care, on the weekends, do a couple rounds. The beauty of this system is because we call it biosynchronous activation, when all the molecules come into the nanoparticles and they all arrive together and they set up this tone and this program of we're going to dump all this shit, and then we come in with the binder, we catch it, and we end the process there. We tie a little bow around it. So doing that push, then the catch, it's going to take you half hour to do that. Wait another half hour before you eat if you're gonna, or just keep fasting. You just got a little cycle of detox. Now you can do that once a day, twice a day, 3 times. You can do single dose, double dose, triple dose. We get into like really rad ones, but you can just keep that around like a supplement and, do a couple rounds a week. Maybe it's on the weekend. Maybe it's on a Monday. Anytime you're feeling kind of foggy and heavy, you go and detox that. What's that?
Of detox.
Little rounds of detox. Yeah. So you need formal one, then you need, little rounds. Some people, it depends how you like to do things. Some people, it's like, once a year I do a month. Others like every quarter I do, 2 weeks. Others are like, I just partied too hard. I need a round of detox.
Well, and then part of the push protocol also, I think you mentioned to me when we were together in the spring, was sauna, working out. That also pushes things out into the system.
Foot baths, massage. It's push, sauna, catch. That works so freaking good. You take all the stuff in your push side, hop in your sauna, and then you drink your binder later. That's just an awesome one. Or if you're going to go get some light movement, don't work out hard, because a hard workout's sympathetic. Walking, though, is parasympathetic. So you want sort of parasympathetic mild exercise. And then your binder. Those iron foot baths, I don't see them in the circuit. They didn't really make it into the biohacking world. They were big in like autism and Lyme and stuff. And I've seen those things really work. If I measure your blood before one, and then you're 30 minutes later, measure it, all your metals levels will jump up. So everybody thinks you're sucking metals out through your feet and stuff, and this bullshit. All that stuff in the bath is from the electrodes, and then something in your foot acids change it different colors. There's some magic there, but that's not where the toxins are going. They're being released from your tissues into the blood and then you're going to pee and shit those out later. So that's working on an autonomic level. That's when your autonomics release, you release toxins. When your autonomics are jacked, they hold on to everything. So there, it's push, foot bath, catch. Push, massage, catch.
Can you speak a little bit more about why you want a parasympathetic activity rather than a sympathetic? For instance, because I do a lot of hot yoga, a lot of Bikram.
Yeah.
And that is the moment you step in that 105-degree room, you're getting triggered sympathetically. Adrenaline, cortisol, and the whole practice is a getting yourself out of sympathetic over and over again. And I've thought since the last event where I heard you really start to speak about the push-catch system, I haven't done it because I'm unsure if I took the push and then went and did a hot yoga.
Well, it depends how long you stay in sympathetic.
It's 90. Okay.
If you break out of sympathetic,
what does the
15 minutes
do?
into it. All right. So sympathetic's what? It's fight or flight.
Right.
And then parasympathetic is rest, digest, repair, regenerate, detoxify. Right? All the regenerative, the clearing away of the perversions. Now, some perversions are good, but cellular perversion, the clearing away of the cellular perversion and regenerating. That's all from parasympathetic. Why? Because this is all prioritization. What's priorities?
Right.
What priorities? When you're in sympathetic, you prioritize survival, and you deprioritize all the other shit. And then when you get the time to chill, then your body goes, okay, now let me do all the other work that's, gonna fix us back up. And so that's why all these things that chronically keep you in sympathetic are a real problem. And the EMF does that, the toxins. So the toxins freaking do that. So mercury in the neurotransmitters, sympathetic is associated with glutamate. And GABA is your parasympathetic. Those are the main ones. That's 80% of all neurotransmission is that pair right there. And, you'd think, oh, glutamate bad. But glutamate is memory and it's priority in your mental space. And that memory is survival. Like, that's a bear, I'm going to die. And so glutamate keeps you on and vigilant. GABA chills you all out. That's like the kava, is making you, I'm sure it's a GABA agonist and chilling you out into that thing. And so the toxins themselves, like mercury goes up and it hyper wires the glutamate receptor, that even at an average level of glutamate, the receptor hyper functions. And so so even the toxins themselves are sending you into sympathetic and holding on to all that. So you got to break that cycle. One of the interesting things, one of my brothers was talking to me back at home. We were taking a little microdose walk through the woods. And, these things like Bikram and getting into a cold plunge, getting into all those uncomfortable situations are helping us to dewire an overactive sympathetic. And so it's working out our control, our conscious control over the autonomics. And so those are good things that allow us to have a little bit more conscious control over sympathetic, parasympathetic. And then there's these chronic irritants that are screwing things up in the background.
Interesting.
So if you are doing the sauna, if you add the cold plunge to it, is that not recommended? Because that maybe that triggers the sympathetic response?
You can get it all done because you can push, sauna, catch, plunge.
Okay.
The catch is sort of tying it up.
And you said it's about a 30-minute window.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's perfect, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. Where does so then let's move into longevity, and I'm curious where your AMPK charge sits with all this.
No, that's a really cool one because it's AMPK dominant, but it does have some NRF2 upregulation too, and some liver activity. So it'll put you into ketosis in like no time. We can sit around and drink beer and eat pizza. The next morning we're gonna take that, and in about 40 minutes, we got blood ketones.
AMPK?
Yeah. Yeah. We used to call it keto before 6. Like you could be keto till 6 p.m. and then eat carbs. Next day, start again. Like it's really good. It's a great AMPK activator. And in fact, that AMPK activation is what a lot of the metabolic pharmaceuticals do. Metformin, that's what metformin does. Bearberine's really good at that. Bearberine's in the AMPK charge. But AMPK charge, it's so it's AMPK activating, but it's got sirtuin activating compounds like resveratrol in it too. So if you have enough NAD, you'll be doing AMPK and sirtuin activation. And when you get to mitochondrial biogenesis, which is before I talked about AMPK being one level and sirtuin being the higher level. When you look at a mitochondria, AMPK activates autophagy. So you'll go into a cell and you'll find all the bad mitochondria, say, and we'll put those into an autophagosome, which is a little liposome in the cell with acids and enzymes to break everything back down, liquefy the mitochondria, liquefy the dead to feed the living. That was the Matrix thing. I always think about that with autophagy. But that's one side of the coin. We're going to kill the bad mitochondria. And how do we find the bad versus the good? When their membranes go bad, they accumulate little tags that say, eat me. And that's actually how it works. When the membranes start depolarizing, they get these little tags on them. And when it's time for autophagy, those are the ones you collect and go into the autophagosome. But now we want to replace them. And that's a trigger called mitochondrial biogenesis. And it's under this thing called PGC1 alpha. And that has to be sirtuin activated. So just like, fasting or working out, AMPK activation will trigger autophagy, but then you need NAD to enable the sirtuin activation to get to the mitochondrial biogenesis. And in fact, if you're trying to do that stuff with low NAD, you won't get that. So caloric restriction effects and stuff won't happen there. All right. So there's AMPK charge is doing AMPK activation, dragging a little NRF2 with it, and sirtuin activation. That's a great everyday one. Right in the morning, drink coffee, take that, wait for guys especially, because we can intermittent fast so much easier. And just wait to eat till lunch, and you just feel freaking great. And in the background, you got low-level detoxification going all the time. The liver sauce has much more NRF2, but still a lot of AMPK. In fact, there was a guy who did a study on liver sauce with fatty liver, and he got 80% of his patients vastly improved their fatty liver just doing a month with push catch. Wow. It's because 1, you're moving toxins out, but 2 is the AMPK activation potential in the liver sauce. But so there's more detox, a little less AMPK in liver sauce than AMPK charge is a little bit of the detox and a bunch more of the AMPK activation. That is one of the most solid, like everyday supplements.
And do you pair that with the NAD platinum that you have?
Yeah.
Where does that fit in?
Yeah. So NAD, you're either going to do NAD platinum, or you're going to do a pair of NAD gold and methyl charge.
I don't have those two. Okay, so.
Yeah, and so NAD pushing NAD has to go with supporting methylation. Those two need to go together. NAD is driving sirtuins, and NAD is turned then into this stuff called nicotinamide, and then that has to be regenerated back to NAD. Now, as you get older, you're less good at regenerating that. Inflammatory interference makes you less good at doing that. And the nicotinamide builds up and blocks the sirtuins. So you need to flush that away, and you flush it away by methylating it with SAMe, S-adenosylmethionine, which is a major thing for, it's your major methyl donor in the world. But when that goes down, you build up homocysteine, you get cardiovascular disease, you get depression, all kinds of problems. That's why SAMe is used so much for depression. So you're depleting SAMe when you're driving NAD, so you need the B vitamins to regenerate the SAMe from the homocysteine. And this is B2, methyl B12, TMG, a little bit of B6. And people miss that in the beginning. They'd be driving all this NAD activity, but not supporting methylation. So first they get a bunch of energy and then they get a crash in the system. Just like, 10 years ago, people were driving methylation with methylfolate. They would first feel really good because it's stabilizing the mast cells and lowering inflammation, clearing up your brain. And then they'd have a crash that they said, well, now we're detoxing and now I'm having the crash. It was actually, they were driving so much methylation, they were depleting NAD in the mitochondria and having a mitochondrial crash. So you need both of those to come together. NAD Platinum puts them together and puts some sirtuin activators in it. It's a nice one-stop shop thing. Great to give to your parents to just take one thing that's going to help them live longer. Okay. And it's a great, easier one for us to take. But often you have to balance the NAD and the methylation. And so we have NAD Gold and methyl charge if you're doing this more independently. And for an average person, it's a 2-to-1 ratio, 4 pumps of NAD Gold, 2 pumps of methyl charge. But then for people who are lower methylators, like if you're prone, like maybe you're really ambitious, but you're prone to being a little bit depressed or having your energy drop down, you probably need more methylation. Or if you've got like the motherfucker genes, MTHFR, 1298 or 677, some sort of mutations in there, then you're going to need more of the methylation. And you do like a 1-to-1. Good friend of mine, he's my patent lawyer, Jonathan, and he was first on 2-to-1. And, we're getting to that age, where stuff crops up, and I was driving with him and I noticed him kind of phase a little bit, like, where the fuck am I? And I'm like, so Jonathan, what's up with that neuro thing there? He goes, yeah, that's been happening. And I'm like, more methylation. And I put him up to 1-to-1, totally disappeared. The balance between, I had this old biological
fucking wizard, man.
dude.
Come on.
So good.
I got this paper I found. It's like biological anthropology, biochemical anthropology. And they're talking about these different civilizations that built up and the balance between NAD and methylation in them. And it was the balance between B vitamin availability. Realize NAD is niacin brought up to its highest level. It was the balance between choline in the diet for methylation. The choline's a methyl group, so it's like base methyl group, and vitamin B3. And if you had all one and not the other, you got a certain type of Parkinson's. If you had all the other and not the one, you got a different type of Parkinson's. They both led to neurodegenerative problems. If you're born with a mom with low NAD, well, you never go anywhere. You're just a runt, never make it out of the pack. But later on, the balance between those really sets the tone. And they were talking about these cascading proteinopathies, and when you hear I'm talking about, these interleavings of the white and the black, all of a sudden you've got all black and no white and stuff like that. And you can't make the energy work anymore. And that'll lead to one dysfunction over another. You're either going to go down this cancer path or you're going to go down this more neurodegenerative path. But when you have both of those and you raise that up, you raise the potential on the human being itself. And these guys are like talking in this kind of language like I talk. And I'm like, and they're talking about our ancient cultures, access to NAD and methylation. I'm like, I fucking love this.
Oh my God, dude.
And I find, at biohacker events, I'm just sitting there squirting methyl charge and everything because everybody's driving all these things, all these texts and stuff, and they drive that NAD system so many different ways and they end up methylation deficient. And so many people who come up to our Airstream and I'm like, I look at them and, that's the wizard. I'm like, boom, 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 boom. Just take that. And they'll be like, oh my God, who turned the lights on? And everything's better. And under these stressors and throughout COVID, we're not talking enough about, what the long-term effect, the next couple of years are going to be just rife with cardiovascular and autoimmunity. And, but those stressors, this new bug through us and our immune system jacking, and then, and COVID turns on AMPK and NRF2, it just fucking crushes them. And so you're going to see all this cardiometabolic disease and toxicity and stuff, but you need more and more methylation to deal with these stressors.
I feel like you were handing out a lot of nano fuel and longevity elite when I was at the event.
I was quietly loading methyl charge into everything. Yeah, I'd give you a shot of this, but I'd throw this stuff on top. I'm like, I don't want to muddy the waters too much, but...
I remember too, right before we did our live podcast, and it was just like, here, take some of this. I was like, whoa, it's game on. Like it's immediate.
Yeah, it's so fast. Yeah, longevity, nanofuel, and a little methyl in there. Woo.
I miss them. That's the one thing I haven't been going with is the methyl charge.
Yeah,
so.
Get the methyl charge.
Yep.
And anytime you feel like shit's just not hitting right, like I should be better, hit that. Whoosh.
And so obviously, like with the melatonin, you're doing that at night. And that's when I would throw in some of the GABA as well. Is that a proper recommendation?
GABA, CBD, melatonin. We have, one CBD Synergies SP that's got GABA, CBD, and melatonin, and 5-HTP, and then a couple herbs.
That was a life changer for me.
Yeah, SP.
Yeah. Oh, the
great.
CBD Synergies.
CBD Synergies. I was giving you the capsules with the CBD Synergies PN for pain. Yeah. SP was for sleep. And that's actually my favorite of all of them.
Which one, the SP or the PN?
The PN.
Yeah.
It can be used for anything. It's CBD, like full spectrum. So there's a little bit of THC in there with curcumin, boswellia, and beta-caryophyllene. Now, the significance of the curcumin is really underrated, but I think it only works in our delivery system. Curcumin, when you get unmetabolized curcumin into the blood, it acts very strongly on CB1 receptors in the brain. So cannabinoid receptors, you get CB1 and CB2. And CB2 is more immune and anti-inflammatory, and CB1 is more right in the central nervous system. That's what gets you high when you take THC. And it does something to modulate that receptor that makes it more amenable to small amounts of THC, really turning on a great anti-inflammatory cascade, both in the central nervous system and in the periphery. And it makes the THC last much longer. When I first was making these nano curcumins, I had my R&D guy throw a couple milligrams of THC in there, and I took these things. I was going off to Europe, and it'd be 3 milligrams of THC, like in an edible, like nothing. You think,
super,
just blowing people away, and they're like, "Oh my fucking god!" And like 8 hours later, they're like, you wake up the next morning, like, I'm still high, and it was beautiful. I kept going, I am curcumin. And there was something gorgeous about that blend. And so when you were going through that, relationship breakdown, anxiety period, I was just pouring those into you and slathering progesterone.
I remember that. He used it all over the arms. And you said it just turned to Eben King. I saw him the next day. He's like, it just turned me around.
I mean, listening to you speak for 5 minutes, anyone understands your mastery of all of this stuff. And you are so beyond that, man. Just as a healer, as a medicine man, you are the quintessential medicine man, dude.
Well, thank you.
And in May, I was going through, a big personal thing that I've talked about on other pods that you can hear anywhere else. And it was the first night. Cal was there. We did our following the heart panel. I spilled my guts. I spilled my guts to this group in this talk, and it was super, super powerful. It felt like essentially, I ended up going into a complete ceremony, inner experience, purge. And it started off, I had a vape pen that I took one hit off of after that panel, and this wave came over me.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I walked out to the field at the property. I was looking out over the field and I'm like, wow, some shit's about to just go down inside of me. And I hear this sound. I was by myself and I hear this sound, and it's Dr. Shade, and I see him talking to somebody, but he's doing this thing. He's doing this thing with his body, and he's like his nervous system is having this reaction, and I'm thinking to myself, why the fuck is he doing what I'm feeling right now? And I went on to basically have a complete breakdown where I had to be taken into the staff bedroom and spent the rest of the night in there sobbing on my hands and knees. I was putting myself into yoga postures, and I was just in a complete purge. And one of my buddies who was there came, and I said to him, Gino, you got to go get Dr. Shade. He's like, okay. I was like, he'll know what to do. And he went and got you. You came in, you had the progesterone, you had the CBD, and you just immediately, it was like you cut right through everything. You said, Eb, this is what's happening right now. This is what you're going through. We're going to squirt you. We're going to load you up with progesterone, bring the adrenaline down. Because I was in a war. I was in an all-out war inside.
Yeah.
And, first of all, I want to thank you so much for that, because it was so meaningful to me and powerful to me that you were just so in tune. And I knew you were amazing already. I already loved you. But that was just like...
Well, I hide the other side. I play the PhD on TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you do.
Exactly. And you're you're such a gift, dude. And you've been a complete gift in my life. And your intuition, like driving with your patent attorney, and he's having his thing, and you're like, John, what's going on there?
Yeah.
And you just know right away. You're like, this is how we balance this out. Let's bring this back to equilibrium. And that's what you did for me. You brought me back into homeostasis.
And that's a really important one, is the use of progesterone in men. It is so great. We have an amazing nano serum progesterone you do topically.
That was the best. Yeah. That was the greatest anti-anxiety.
By the way, Peyton
remedy.
Peyton did it orally the first time. She didn't read the label.
Yeah. And that's okay. They're all safe that way. But legally I can only do it as a cosmetic, but this, like, we don't think about that with men, but progesterone is the CBD of hormones, and it's so much more powerful than CBD.
Yeah.
It just brings you right down. With women, the irritability of estrogen dominance, progesterone is the answer to that. And it just brings them right down right away. It helps them sleep. But men with excess men with excess adrenaline, men with sleep issues, men with prostate issues, it's huge. It actually blocks DHT formation, slows that down. So it's good long-term for your prostate. You put it on your hair. If you're a guy like me who loses it from DHT, and it'll help regenerate hair. But it's really that ability to offset the adrenaline and take you out of sympathetic into parasympathetic. It opens up liver. In fact, estrogen blocks liver. Progesterone opens it up. So there's all these uses of progesterone that just aren't known as much, and especially with men. And it was the tool to bring you down.
Brought me right down. I thought I was going to die in that room. That's how I felt. I was just in a full-blown fucking adrenal war.
Yeah.
And you came in, hit me with that, and it was like, oh my God, I could breathe. It was like somebody pulled the pin out of the pressure cooker, dude.
That's it. Open up your arms. I'm going to rub them with this. Settle you down.
No, I have to thank you for that, man, and acknowledge your absolute mastery and just beyond the science, and your intuition and your connection. And you're the man, dude.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you. Yeah. I really appreciate you, man.
I appreciate this.
Yeah, this
man.
is a lot
You know,
of
it's
fun,
like-
dude.
Yeah, you know what? It's a great time in my life right now. You know, I'm post-divorce and post-COVID. COVID broke up tribes, or at least apparent tribes that were there.
Right.
Like in my medical world, you saw the people running for the vaccine, just save me, save me. And then the other ones like, keep that fucking poison shit away from me. And what were united groups became very divided very quickly. But I did see like a reforming of the tribes, and I feel great about who has come into my world and sort of what the new tribes are. And you know, it's like, you know, I'm at this age, it's like, who am I gonna run with into the end? You know, and who can I really trust and who has my back? You know, I was sort of kept away from having male friends for a long time. And now it's like, oh, fuck, this feels so good. There's so many good people. And I, you know, these sort of new alliances that are forming, the minds that are coming together, you know, it really feels good. And it's such an important time.
It's very important. Very important.
Yeah, I feel that too. And I think it's been like a winnowing down of like kind of like this opening up, like
who's really in the tribe.
You know, they're on the same boat, and then it's like, not exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
There's
you know,
a smaller group within the group.
The storm is up there, and people are fucking bailing left and right.
That's right.
Know? It's like, oh, government, save me, please. Oh, you pussies! You fucking go for that? Just a little threat, and you fucking jump overboard.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a tough period for a lot of folks.
Oh,
it was the great kind of awakening for many.
Yeah.
Big time, man.
Yeah.
Big time. I mean, I remember meeting you for the first time, Cal. Was like meeting my brother here.
Yeah.
You know,
that was earlier this year,
it
right?
was March, South by Southwest. I met you for the first time.
Seems like way longer than that.
We've known each other for lifetimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing, man. I've definitely been experiencing that. We've talked about this, Cal, over this past year. And, you know, we were talking about it in May of turning my life totally down to zero. It just back to neutral, you know, and for about pretty much from the second half of the year on, May on, I did nothing but teach yoga, take yoga, and spend time with my daughter.
Yeah.
And in that time, I've whittled down my life to the exact things that I desire to be involved in and the people I want to spend time with.
Yeah.
You know, you make yourself, at one time, I found a lot of validation and self-worth in putting myself into all of these groups and like getting myself in the mix and doing all this shit and being in action constantly. And I realized, Eb, that has nothing to do with how much you're worth or what you can bring to the table. Or it's like at the end of the day, when am I filling my cup up so that I can be the radiant light that I'm destined to be?
Yep.
You know,
that's what people are looking for.
Yeah. And I realize it's smaller and smaller. It's a smaller and smaller circle. It's a smaller and smaller menu of things I'm involved in. Like earlier today, I ran into some friends that we know. Like, Eb, you got to come to this concert. I'm like, no, bro. I'm not going to the concert. I'm seeking solitude, man. Silence, quiet, stillness, and really close connections. That's what I'm seeking now. Yeah. And my life, it's like the universe, God is just bringing me more and more beautiful people, experiences, things that are in direct alignment with where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, I'm feeling like a call to like a shedding period. And I know ever since Eb and I had spent some time together, I've been like working to unwind my busyness. And while I've made great strides, there's still stuff that is there, and it's accumulated. And it's just like letting go of that stuff to create more bandwidth for whatever it is I want to do, and like being really clear about that. And that's been, I think, challenging, is that I've thought it would have been easier, and I didn't realize how deeply, ingrained I was in all these different things. And so it's just like the unlocking of those, relationships and patterns and, different things that I'm involved in has been much more challenging than I would have expected. But I'm making progress for sure, but yeah, the volcano's nice.
I love the background. It sounds like we're like crinkling up tinfoil. And that's these guys sucking on these volcanoes of tobacco.
Tell me this. I do want to wrap on the supplement stuff so we can, I know there's a few other things we want to chat about, but specifically the one, talk about that. And then I want you to talk about the ketone stuff. And like, you fascinated me with where that seawater is actually the kind of life cycle of it.
Yeah. So let's go with the one first. So the one, if you're only going to take one thing, what's it going to be? It's going to be a mitochondrial supplement. And before, this was before we made all the NAD and all these things, before mitochondria was sort of center stage in this discussion all the time, I made this one supplement for it. And the star of it, and you'll see there's a couple, I talk about programs like Liver Sauce has a BioFlow program, NRF2 program, a mast cell stabilizer program. So this has a couple in it. And it's got these primary nutrients. We'll come back to them. And then it's got a big thing of phosphatidylcholine, like a full dose of PC in there, and then a bunch of adaptogenic herbs. And in those primary ingredients, there's something called PQQ, pyrroloquinoline quinone. That was this sort of super CoQ10 that came out years ago. So Asprey had put out Unfair Advantage was PQQ and CoQ10. So this has this nano PQQ, nano CoQ10, some resveratrol, some tocotrienol. But that PQQ is just, that shit is just magic. And it's this beautiful red color that actually stains your teeth blue, but it's red. And it's an AMPK activator. It's a sirtuin activator. It's got specificity for that mitochondrial biogenesis gene, PGC1 alpha. When I first took it, like, it just blew me away. It woke up all this stuff in my body. And interestingly, it woke up my immune system to remember that it was sitting on old bits of lime. I'm a East Coaster, and we all got a little lime in there, and it was like, wow, and I just started clearing all this stuff out, and I was like, this has got to go in a supplement, and so I put it into the one, and so you've got up there the PQQ, resveratrol, CoQ10, tocotrienol. And then the PC for all the membranes that drive the mitochondrial health, and the adaptogen blend. We did a series with Sunhorse Botanicals down kind of San Diego area. There's this great herbalist down there, Dan Moriarty, and he had this idea of global resonance. So adaptogens all grow in certain areas and adapt you to that climate there. Like rhodiola is one you can use for altitude sickness. It grows at only above 13,000 feet. So it grows at altitude and harmonizes you to that. So he'd take South American, Chinese, Tibetan, Indian adaptogens from all these different areas. Eleutherococcus, that's out in Siberia, that's where that came from. And some ginsengs. And so that was this whole global resonance formula he put together. So adaptogens, PC, and then those super nutraceuticals. And it's among people like us, it's like, it's probably your favorite or one of your favorites.
It's my favorite.
Yeah.
One is my favorite.
Yeah. And it's Mindy's favorite. It's really my favorite. Yeah. Like, so many people just freaking love it because it just feels so good. I mean, yeah, we have Longevity Elite, we've got the NAD, but that thing does so much. And at the time, I would, my mother-in-law was coming over from France, and she was coming from sea level and coming up to the Mile High City where we lived outside of Denver. You know, altitude stuff, swollen legs, could only walk like, you know, she just could walk like 20 feet and then would be winded. And I put her on ultravitamin and the one. And, you know, and that is the combo. Anybody's parents here, you give them that. It will change anybody's life who's above 60 because it's turning on mitochondria and getting absorption where there was none of all these vitamins. So all of a sudden, this woman, after about a week of that, she's walking her dog around the lake. It's a 1 mile track around the lake. And then after another week, she's walking them twice a day around this track. I mean, it was just freaking unreal what that did for her.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So that's the one. I mean, it is just an awesome, awesome Quicksilver supplement.
Mm.
And then you asked about ketone. So ketone is awesome. And it's not a Quicksilver supplement. We're the custodians of that supplement. And ketone is a seawater supplement. It's seawater harvested off the coast of France and from a specific area where there's a permanent upwelling of water. So this is important because people will be like, seawater is all polluted, right? So seawater goes in these global conveyor belts. And like water will rise in the Arctic, run along the top of the Pacific to the Antarctic, sink down there, come up along the Atlantic, along the ocean floor, gathering all the minerals off the ocean floor, all the stuff that we're not getting in our food, all these things that are supposed to be coming off of rocks, chelated off the rocks with the organic matter, delivered to the plants and brought into them. We're just not getting that anymore. Every element of the periodic table is on this water, and this water is thousands of years old. And then it comes up in this place off the coast of France, it brings these nutrients up from the seafloor, and that creates a phytoplankton bloom, the little one-celled plants. And you can see this from space. It's a spiralic, it's a vortex that's coming up there. And there's a spiralic green phytoplankton bloom. And then that gives way to the zooplankton that feed on them, the little tiny animals that, sea animals. And so they go in right at the end of the phytoplankton going into the zooplankton, and they pull this seawater out with all these minerals and all these organic compounds that have come out of the phytoplankton, and they filter sterilize it. Never heat it, filter sterilize it. And its original thing was that they would dilute it down to the same saltiness called isotonic with your blood plasma. And the guy who invented this stuff, René Quinton is Quinton. I say, Quinton is what the French say, Quinton is what the Northerners say, and Quentin is what the Middle Americans say. Anyway, you say it. René Quinton was obsessed with the idea that the balance of minerals in the seawater was exactly the same as the balance of minerals in your cell. And we need to reestablish this balance. And this stuff was taken orally. They'd do IVs, they do sub-Qs, they would nebulize, and they would flush this stuff in. And there's these pictures. This started in the late 1800s,
right?
1890-ish. And they have pictures of, these kids with cholera, just their skin falling off. They treat them with Quinton for a couple of weeks and everything's new. All this malnutrition, these skinny little people who couldn't hold any weight come back to normal. They did a study where they had women who, to get into this study, they had to have 5 miscarriages. Wow. And they fed them Quinton and then got them pregnant, and 95% of them took it to term. And then they followed those kids for another 15 years. It was really amazing. This guy was like a national treasure in France. And he was one of these Renaissance men. He did all kinds of things, but one was be a biologist. And this stuff was in the pharmacopoeia of France for for eons, and it was this injectable IV, all those different things. It's like you got to get like an underground source, for someone to do that stuff IV for you. Not that I haven't done a bunch, but it's illegal to talk about it here. And it was taken out of the French pharmacopoeia in the 1990s. Just the pharma companies were like, get this stuff out of there.
Right.
And
it's too good. It works too well.
Too good. Get it out of there. So now you get those glass double tubed ampules, crack those open and drink it. Or now it's in foil pouches. You crack it open and drink it. But the reason they're in those ampules like that was there was two things. One, they were sterile packed, so the doctors would just put a needle in there and draw it up and use whatever they were using. And homeopaths would pull up some homeopathic into the seawater and then inject it in different places. They had all these uses of it. And so the sterility was one, but then the double tipped was able to keep what they would call the rotations, the vortical rotations of the sea. And, some of these crazy sort of quantum biologists over in Europe had some way of measuring this. And it was only, they would relate it to, how wine bottles have these tips and they have the dimple in the bottom. And it's to keep the rotations going in here. So there was this whole mysticism around the shape of these ampules too. And so then you end up with these two forms of Kenton, the hypertonic and the isotonic. Hypertonic is the straight seawater. And isotonic is that seawater diluted down to isotonicity, same salt level as your blood. So the seawater is 3.3% saline. That means if you took 100 ml of water and put 3.3 grams of sodium chloride in there, it would taste like seawater. Blood and plasma is 0.9. So it's much less salty. And you taste these two separately. It's a very different kind of flavor.
Different.
But the crazy thing is that they have opposite effects in your mouth on the autonomic nervous system.
Right.
The hypertonic, that extra saltiness in your mouth shifts you. If you're looking at a good heart rate variability, you see yourself shift more sympathetic, more tuned up, and more on it. And so it's stimulating, it's remineralizing, alkalizing. But it tunes you up there sympathetic. But if you had done the hypertonic, you'd see your HRV move to a more parasympathetic tone. So when you're detoxing, you do the isotonic. Now, if you're just remineralizing and you're just dumping this stuff in your water you're drinking, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're just getting the minerals. That's one of the uses of Kenton. But then to shift it hyper or sympathetic, parasympathetic, it's got to be straight in your mouth, held, swished around, and its reception of the tonicity in the oral membranes that cascades into the neurological response.
Now, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating thing for me, especially as someone who I've been hospitalized multiple times for dehydration. You want some of that? I've been hospitalized multiple times for dehydration. During my football career, I had full body cramps, taken to the hospital.
Right.
Had to get IVs. And now I do hot yoga. I teach hot yoga. And so hydration, remineralization, understanding for me, especially sodium is the game changer for me in my hydration levels. In particular, sodium and magnesium. But sodium in particular, and really finding nothing better than Kenton.
So you find, so there was this.
With that being said, my question is there a reason it comes in the size that it does?
Oh, so you want more?
I want more. Because I could take a glass of it.
Yeah. And
after a yoga class.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, all right, a couple things here. So we said that, the hyper and the iso have these different autonomic routines. So it's like hyper in the morning, iso at night is one way it's done. hyper for strengthening and tonifying, isotonic for healing and detoxification. In fact, in your push, you do some isos at the end that'll tune you to the drainage part of it. It tunes up the immune system. It fixes the gut. It does all those things. Now that's using it as this healing mechanism. And then there's using it as the remineralization, the hydration mechanism. And you'll see, so doctors use it, with really sick patients, but then athletes and high performers and the rest of us just love its ability for recovery. After you sweat like mad, nothing is as good as that.
Yeah.
But Eben was saying they come in these 10 mil glass ampules, and then we put them into 10 mil. And for the recovery, you're just talking about hypertonic, the high salt one.
Right.
And they come in 10 mil packets. They came in 20 mil packets, but nobody wanted to buy them. And I'm like, what is wrong with you people?
They didn't have Eb there.
They didn't have Eb to sing the song of the 20 mil packet. I hate 10 mil packets. We need a cheerleader for the 20 mil.
Yeah, the 10, you feel like totally short-changed. Like the ampule, even though it's the same amount.
Oh, feels good, but that 10 mil, you totally
there's gotta be more in there.
Yeah, what's going on? And I hate that one.
Yeah.
And we used to sell this 20 mil one, and it was like, I love this stuff.
Yeah, totally.
And I'll see if I can get that back. But
maybe for the inner circle.
So what we have is what I was leading to. Is 1 liter bottles.
Okay, now we're talking, dude.
Now we're talking. And, we had to set it up so we would only sell those to doctors.
Oh, okay.
But, Dr. Eb, Dr. Cal, I can get you on the inside link to the 1 liter bottle.
Amazing, because I was asking, we actually never got to close the loop on this, but I had asked you if there was a difference energetically because it's not in an ampule.
Yeah, well, so...
good question.
And you were refilling when I was talking about those ampules. What they preserve is the vortical energy. This is coming up in a permanent vortical upwelling from the ocean floor, bringing all those minerals, and they go into the center of that vortex, and they pull that. We used to talk about the vortex power in there. Like if you ever do this stuff, like you bang this stuff, it's like, oh my God.
I remember you telling me that.
It's just amazing. Oh my God, this
like
warmth comes up through you and just fills you. And all of a sudden you're psychic with everybody in the room for a couple of minutes, and then it kind of fades off. It's freaking beautiful. And there's such power in it. And the double-tipped ampules, they're able to keep this rotational energy. And I was saying there's these funny quantum biologists over in France that have this way of measuring that. And there's 14,000 rotations per minute going on in there, and it has to be in that ampule. And that's for using those, like the isotonic and how it hits the mouth and resets everything. That's that vortical energy. And when you're doing those packets, you're getting more the mineral balance and a little bit less of the energetics. But you're often looking for that in the recovery. Now, the liter bottle I like a lot because it's still a nice shape, that bulleted shape, a little dimple on the bottom. In fact, the French, it's actually, this is made in Spain, but the water's off the coast of France. And these guys lecture about wine bottles, how their tips are shaped, and the dimple in the bottom is to maintain, this rotational energy in there. And so the 1 liter is a nice, harmony between volume, no foil, and plastic liner, and it's got the goods.
Well, and so I want to dig a little bit deeper into this because my family absolutely loves these things, but I feel like we need to dial in the proper kind of use case. And my son will be dehydrated, and he's like doing a lot of these, and he's like still kind of cramping. And so I'm like, you need to be probably drinking more water in general.
Yeah.
And we have the Kangen water, and then we put it through a vortex. And so putting it through the vortex makes it more bioavailable, needing less water. So he needs to probably engage in that a bit.
I'll have to be a little careful with Kangen water because there's a conflation of ideas in Kangen water. Let me just see if you know. What's the therapeutic thing that's in the Kangen water?
The negative charge.
No,
Oh, come on.
it's hydrogen gas. That electrode that's making it alkaline, like if you just put some salt and water and you put 2 electrodes in, one side will be alkaline and reducing, the other side will be acid and oxidizing. And the reducing is hydrogen gas that's formed at the electrode tip. So that's hydrogen saturated water. That's what Kangen is. The alkaline thing is a fucking joke, right? You know, what one of the great things that alkalizes your blood? Lemon juice. It's pH 2, you know. The pH scale thing is bullshit.
Sure.
And
I did hear that.
Consuming HCl from your stomach. And if you have stomach issues, you know, I had a friend who was just drinking tons and tons of that all the way to the top. And he ended up, you know, with GI issues. So just, you know what you're going for there. And yeah, the charge and alkaline thing is bullshit.
That's good to know. But what are your thoughts on running it through a vortex device?
I like all those things. And you know, one thing we didn't talk about when we were talking about membranes was 4th phase water.
Sure.
And the Jerry Pollack.
Well, that's where I thought that's where, again, where I bought into this Kangen idea of the negative charge creating that 4th phase.
Yeah. So one of the great laws of water chemistry is the law of electroneutrality. You can't have net negative water.
All these years.
I know.
Fuck me.
But you can have surfaces that have a net negative charge, and the surfaces, the 4th phase water is produced off of a surface with a net negative charge. And so he uses these sulfated surfaces to create these things. But this is one of the things that good membrane structure does. The phosphate heads of the phospholipids are able to catalyze the formation of 4th phase water off of the membrane. This is one of the great reasons to keep, you know, membrane health going. And the 4th phase water is an area where things that normally wouldn't happen. So, you know, this, I think I said yesterday, the idea of alchemy is to bring possibilities so close together that the improbable happens. And in biology, if you had just broken down all the structures and just see what reactions spontaneously happen, almost none of them do. You're bringing together potentiality by creating these perfections either in the charge separation or the water structuring. And those are both coming from the health of the membranes. So now back to vortexes and stuff. There's a lot we don't quite understand in structuring of water. The 4th phasing, we got that. Other things we don't totally know, but I am a big believer in the vortex. Back when I was a farmer, I was a biodynamic farmer. And, you know, they have these sort of, you know, magically charged things they put in water. And
I wish Jared were here to discuss this.
Yeah.
Because our buddy Jared, have you met Jared yet, Picard?
No.
He was at the Runga event.
You met Jared.
Yeah.
Be Here Farm.
Yeah, I guess.
You met him probably in at least
It would have been
last October.
Yeah. And so he does biodynamics?
Oh, yeah.
That's his big thing.
Oh, all right. Well, we would riff on this for a long time.
Know.
And, you know, there was, you know, you have to stir this stuff into, you get the water going in a vortex in one direction, and then you go in the other direction. And, you know, they take they make this super compost like in a cow horn, and it takes the vortical energy of these spiralic cow horns are sucking cosmic energy into this perfect compost. And then you're breaking it out and liberating it into the water. And then you're spraying just like droplets of water on top of the land. And it creates, you're going to do one that's the manure in the horn, and that's creating down and rooting and leafy and thick stems and the low strength. And then you're going to throw the silica on. And the silica has been done in the horn too, but in a different season. So winter, the manure's in there for winter, taking these down earthy forces. And then in summer, the quartz is in there bringing these rising forces that are raising up into the sun and lengthening and breaking into flower and fruit. And yeah, I used to grow weed with that.
Oh, dude. Well, and it's exactly what he talked about. I was going to say that the quartz gets in it's such a fine powder,
fine powder.
That it creates that connection to the sky.
And so there's all this stuff that goes on with the vortex. And I had made these machines at the time that would create a perfect vortex that we would do this in. And there was a kind of testing for energy where it would become something you could see. It was called capillary dynamolysis, and it was stuff these Germans used to do in the early mid 1900s. And yeah, if you made a perfect vortex, you would get more energy into this thing. And so we don't know exactly how to quantify that stuff, but I do love all the vortex stuff. Ben blew me away. His dad makes all these devices. It's like Greenfield Naturals or Greenfield Water.
And I had reached out to him actually, and we were going to work on it with our pool.
Yeah.
He does systems for your house, pool, and
whatnot. And he knows all the traditional water technology, the carbon monoblock stuff, the RO, whatever level you want to clean the water up to. And then he's got all the energetic stuff in it that gives it that extra zip.
So tell me this. This is, again, for my 19-year-old son who works out pretty hard. And again, he loves both the ISO and the hyper. What is like proper protocol for him in a given day?
Hyper in the morning.
How much?
2.
So about 20 milliliters.
Yeah, 20 mils in the morning. ISO, 20 mils at night. After the workout, it's always a little bit of a question for me. Do you go right into the mouth, or do you put it in the water and drink it down? Or it just depends. Do you still want to be sort of lit up, go right into the mouth, and the body does respond? I mean, that's, all the athletes are like, that's the freaking, the best recovery stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in fact, some of the pro football players buy it and stuff.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, one of the most fascinating things, you don't get a whole lot of good information in the NFL training room. It's not a whole lot of good information. There are nuggets of great information interspersed with a lot of like boilerplate stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's stuck with me throughout my life is when you're only 2% dehydrated, your cognitive function significantly declines.
Wow.
And so that, speaking from experience alone, remineralizing and getting that hyper mineralized tonic back into your system after you've had an intense workout, sweat a lot, whatever, depleted yourself, it really fucking re-energizes your whole nervous system and your brain.
Yeah, and it's funny how the funny thing here is you're like, but wait, doesn't salt dehydrate you? The minerals help drive the water into the cells, because you all know these people who drink a ton of water and don't get it. They're never kind of rehydrating. And you need the mineral balance to work with the structuring of the water and the health of the aquaporins, which are little tubes that the water transfers through to get into the cell. So the minerals help get the water to get into the system to really rehydrate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because you could drink water all day and you're not hydrated at all.
Yeah. Yeah, just drinking RO all the time.
Yeah,
if you're not getting those minerals in there, it's just not going to go in.
It's just going right out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very real thing. Hydration in particular. I haven't drank any alcohol in probably 6-8 months. And I mean, I drank gallons of alcohol during my football career.
Oh yeah.
And that's been just this steady process of making myself whole and learning about what really works, and alcohol just doesn't serve me. And hydration, though, proper hydration is a fucking game changer in your life overall, just to make the whole system function better. Like you were talking about the studies with the kids that they did long ago, and the women with infertility issues.
Oh, that was crazy.
Like just changing the water and hydrating.
You were out of the
people.
room. Women to get into the study had to have 5 miscarriages. And then all they did was feed them ketone, got them pregnant again. 95% of them went full term, had a kid. They followed the kids for 15 years and they were like super healthy. Yeah. So we call it a ketone baby. Any pregnant woman, anyone who gets pregnant, you get her ketone.
Yeah.
I got to pass that along to my wife because she's a birth doula, and
she's got to know that.
And she's a huge fan of this stuff, but just didn't
know that part. No, it was magic.
You're coming out with a testosterone product, so I'm curious to know about that. And along with that, where does the DHEA fit into some sort of protocol?
Yeah, so we have a whole hormone line. We have a female hormone line, and we're working on the men's. So just to cover the female hormone line. So, for women, you got to, they used to just give them estrogen and progesterone, and it's like, that's no fun. They need the androgens built up, and they need a nice, healthy testosterone level. And all men who have partners that start supplementing testosterone know the benefits of that. And it's really a game changer, right? So they need the androgens built up, and then they need the estrogens and progesterones. And so in this whole system, the DHEA Plus is a product that has DHEA and pregnenolone. Now, DHEA is your largest circulating hormone. It's thought of as an adrenal hormone. Most of it's made in the adrenal cortex. And then it's what cascades and is transformed into testosterone and estrogen and a lot of the other androgenic things. And so in this nanoparticle, when the DHEA goes in there, it doesn't have to go through the gut and the liver. It can immediately turn into testosterone. And so women, when they take this, they'll get a super physiologic level of DHEA. It'll be above the reference ranges. Not a ton, but, reference ranges, will go up to like 350, and maybe they'll be like, 450, 500, 550. And all my friends who really know hormones are like, yeah, no problem at all. In fact, there's no data on that ever being a problem. In fact, the more DHEA, the more metabolic fitness, the more cognitive fitness. It's only associated with good things. And then their test will be up at the top of the reference range. So they got good test, great DHEA, all the other androgenic metabolites. You've got a couple of nutraceuticals in there. You've got DIM and chrysin to help your metabolism of the hormones, especially the DIM for estrogen metabolites. There's estrogen metabolites that are good and ones that aren't so good. This shifts you all into the good metabolites. And then some adaptogens to help with the hormone receptors and the transformations between the hormones. We don't realize, that hormone activity, like how much a hormone is doing for you, is a combination of the hormone level and the density and health of the hormone receptors. It's a lock and key thing. The hormone goes in, turns the key, and that activates the programs behind it. And so if you either have low receptor density or dirty receptors, like with endocrine disruptors, environmental pollutants on it, you can have a good level of hormones, but not have that activity of the hormones. So one of the things that the old adaptogenic herbs like ginseng and for women, dong quai, would be increase the density of the hormone receptors so you could take the signal more easily. So that's everything that's in DHEA plus. And the only reason we call that more of a women's thing is that a lot of guys will turn that DHEA right into estrogen. We are forbid by some cruel trick of nature from turning DHEA supplementation right into testosterone.
See, I always thought it did. I remember back in the day, I was taking these, tablets that were DHEA that were supposed to boost my test.
No, it did. Yeah,
Fuck.
it's been studied up.
It didn't
down.
work.
Yeah,
And eventually had to go on the
the real
injection.
sauce. Yeah. So for women, all right. So that does all the androgens, and some of that cascades into estrogen. But then you need to have the right amount of estrogen, and you need a lot of progesterone. And so, as topical nano serums, we did progesterone plus and estradiol plus. And so that whole system covers everything in a woman. And so they'll do in the morning the DHEA plus. They might do some of the progesterone in the morning topically, and then a bunch more at night. And depending on if they're premenopausal, perimenopausal, or postmenopausal, they may or may not need extra estrogen. Everybody postmenopausal will need some estrogen on top. Hysterectomies definitely need a bunch more, but they can solve the whole hormone puzzle right with that group there. Now, guys, we can't just put in the DHA and cascade through to testosterone. I am working on how to get around that. It's got to be some.
You'll figure it
hack.
out, no doubt.
Yeah. But we, in these sublinguals, we made a sublingual testosterone. We ran a patent on it. It's beautiful. We've tested it out. You could be like a testosterone blood level of 300 and take 10 milligrams or 12 milligrams of this sublingual, and you'll transiently go up to like 2,500, 3,000, like really high. Yeah, totally. And then over a couple hours, it comes back. And when it's up there, it goes in and it turns all the freaking locks and it activates all those programs. It doesn't need to stay up all the time. You need to stay up all the time, but it doesn't. And what's the beauty of this? So you and I have injected, we had this funny, Asprey and I had this funny thing where we were being really honest about it. It's like, I bet your balls are small, and so it leads to testicular atrophy. When you're injecting testosterone cypionate or propionate, you're keeping these high levels all the time that have a negative feedback loop that turn off testicular function, and your balls shrivel up.
Yeah, fact.
Yep, fact. And the beauty of this sublingual, once a day, you go up into the real high ranges, you activate all the androgenic programs, and then it goes away. And your test, as it comes back down, this is the cool thing we found. As that peak is coming back down, your testicles put out a surge of LH, which means they're going, oh, wait, we're losing that test. Let's make some more. And so it actually doesn't shut your testicles off. And so you've got the full package, and then, with that, ejaculate volume and density and color, like the full sperm package is on, because it's a contraceptive. Injectable testosterone is a contraceptive. And then think about all these football players that have their heads rattled, and the pituitary, the pituitary gonadal axis is shot, and they're not making tests. And those were the homicidal ones were the ones with no test. And so how do we get that back, but let them still be fertile? They're young. And so these sublinguals are really going to be a beautiful way to do that. We've tested them out. They're great. And we're just getting them into compounding pharmacies. And so one of the first pharmacies is in Florida. It's called Amex, just like your American, exchange. Amex Platinum. No, it's just called Amex, pharmacy or something. And there'll be a bunch. It's going to cascade through, and there'll be a bunch of people making these things. And we'll be able to have our cake and eat it too.
So how will we get? How do you get access? Obviously can't order it online.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even. I don't even have Inner Circle stash. I can't even touch that stuff. Testosterone is more tightly controlled than like anything in the universe, and except growth hormone. That's all pretty tight. Another great one. So you have to have your doctor write you a script for it, and they have to call it into one of these compounding pharmacies, and then the compounding pharmacy will send it to you.
Awesome. And that's available now at Amex.
It will be in like 3-4 weeks.
Okay. So we'll say by November, sometime in November.
Yeah. And then by January, there'll be a bunch of other pharmacies that'll carry it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So, prior to that, what are men doing? What kind of protocols are you recommending for men with low test?
Some of the longevity elite.
Yep.
is really helps with that. The Nano Mojo, which was one of those herbals, the One, those all help give you that tune, that even if your test isn't going way up, that androgenic activity to it. So here's the cool thing about adaptogens. So all the hormones, what we call steroid hormones, have what's called the steroid backbone. And if you pulled out a picture of the hormones, the center all looks the same. It's these 3 6-membered rings and a 5-membered ring. And the only difference is what's on the outside. The oxygen's here or it's over there. It's a single bond. It's a double bond. That's all that separates estrogen from testosterone, and it's vastly different activity. All the adaptogens that we love, the ginsenosides and ginseng, the astragalosides and astragalus, the withanolides and ashwagandha, gypanosides in, I forget the name of the herb, all of them have the steroid backbone. They're made to interact with your hormone receptors, which is, what was longevity medicine in China hundreds of years ago? You're taking tons of those plants, and then how do you do the hormone replacement? You're eating bull testicle, you're eating deer penis, you're eating, you're getting growth hormone off the tips of the antlers. That's what that is in the deer antler velvet. So you're eating organs just like we eat thyroid replacing. You're eating organs, and you're doing these adaptogens that tune up the whole system and make it more receptive.
Dude, it's fascinating.
I love this.
Holy shit. Before I forget, is there any kind of people are going to be, anybody who listens to this, you're fucking crazy if you don't just go in and clean out the shop. Is there any kind of discount code that we can offer?
No, we'll give you a discount code, and usually it's a 10%, but we'll do a 15.
Come on,
time limited.
Yeah,
and then we'll drop it down to a 10 for a longer period. We just got to talk to my people, and they'll generate the codes.
And I can say what the code, could the code be unlearn?
It'll be unlearn 15.
Okay, unlearn 15.
Yep,
perfect. Fuck yeah.
You're going to want to do that.
Did you have anything else? I know, Abby, you had a few other questions. Is there anything else that's on your mind?
No, we covered so much good stuff. Lately, I've been really diving into the ginseng.
Yeah.
I've been texting you about that.
Yeah, but the red versus the white.
Yeah, the red, it was interesting because I started taking this. I think it's called ginseng sublime from Dragon Herbs.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of red.
There's a lot of red. And I would take it. I'd be driving around, and I do hot yoga. But I'd be driving around, even going to yoga class, and I'd be thinking to myself, I am so fucking hot right now.
Yeah.
My skin is on fire. And it was a couple days, and I thought to myself, it's got to be something I'm taking. It's got to be this ginseng. I texted you about it.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, red will definitely heat you up.
Yeah.
So I had to dial that back because it became almost unbearable to go into the hot yoga room.
You shouldn't be, red's for old guys.
So the white, that's the shit.
Yep.
And I texted you the other day and I said, what do you think about white ginseng? You said, I like it a lot.
Yeah.
And
it's even net slightly cooling.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's just ginseng for me, it's so grounding, anchoring. Like I texted you that it feels like my balls are anchored to the center of the earth. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
It's just like so sturdying, it's steadying, it's anchoring, it's grounding, it's powerful.
It's powerful. And so it was known as an anti-anxiety thing. And it's not because it affects GABA receptors or glutamate receptors. It just makes you comfortable in your skin.
Right.
And so adaptogens and CBD are different things. Adaptogens are working on the CBD, the cannabinoids, working on the neurotransmission to make you less jumpy and less anxious about the space around you. And the adaptogens are just making you anchored and comfortable in the space around you.
Yes.
So one's keeping it from scaring you, and the other one is making you fearless.
Right.
And then what about these different ginsengs? So red versus white. So red is mostly like Korean and Chinese ginseng. We know mostly Korean red ginseng. We get that here. They take the ginseng root and then they cook it in oil. They cook it in red wine, which is what turns it red. And they're like steaming it and cooking it. And there's maybe some honey involved sometimes. And that is heating it up. It must be changing chemically some of the ginsenosides in there into this warming type of thing. The white is the raw ginseng. So there's no ginseng that comes out of the ground red. It's processed into that. And in Chinese medicine, they learned how to process things to change their energetics. And so the white is just raw out of the ground. And the most common source of that is American white out of Wisconsin. And it's a great thing. You know, in Chinese medicine, they say it stimulates spleen, which is your ability to turn food into energy. So you're burning energy out of the food, mixing it with air, which just means really, mixing food with air. Sounds a lot like respiration, like it might be going on in the mitochondria, like oxygen coming in with things from the citric acid cycle, burning them off and making ATP. Well, was it turn out that these ginsenosides do, among all this, in addition to all this hormone stuff, they're also sirtuin activators and have this special activity on mitochondrial function. And so they're bringing it up on a number of different levels, including some of those levels that we're talking about that would be happening like with resveratrol and in the one. And so ginseng is really great in how it hits on this hormone level, a neurotransmission level, a mitochondrial, the sirtuin programs. It's just getting all that stuff all together in one shot.
Love it. Awesome. I don't have anything else.
Yeah, it feels like just an amazing time to wrap.
Yeah.
so good.
So awesome.
We've got a lot of stuff covered there.
Yeah, we did. And next time we'll bring Jared in and we'll get into the biodynamics.
Oh, yeah.
That's
I'd
fun.
love to talk on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, love that.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you, Cal. Thank you, Eb.
Thank you, brother.
My brothers.
You're the man, dude. The absolute man. Cal, thanks for the invite again.
My pleasure. Love you guys.
Love you.
Love you all.